one of the things that is really gratifying as we come to July 4th is I really believe that the American people are beginning to write their own narrative. They're beginning to not let the press direct their attention. They're beginning to learn to direct their attention to the things that really matter, no matter what the press says. Yesterday, we had this wonderful July 4th special with Jordan Peterson, and both Ben actually brought this up, though it's in Jordan's book as well, is there's a study where they asked a number of students to watch a soccer match and count how many times one team, the white team, how many times they passed the ball. And so everybody was focused on how many times they passed the ball, and they all got the number right. It was like 15 times or whatever. But half of them missed the fact that a gorilla walked into the middle of the field, a guy dressed up as a gorilla, during the game. So they only saw what they were directed to see. They didn't see what was actually happening. The press uses that technique all the time because they are all on one side, because all the networks, the New York Times, CNN, they're all on one side and they're all dedicated to pushing the Democrat line, the left-wing line. They direct your eyes to one thing, and that's what they expect you to feel about. That's what they expect. That's how they expect to set the agenda. That's why the president should be talking about immigration right now instead of talking about the upcoming Russia summit or the fact that he's making progress with North Korea or what he's trying to do on trade. No. They are directing their cameras at crying babies at the border. So that's what you should be thinking about. That is how they set the narrative. And of course, it's collaborative. They point their cameras in that direction, and then the activists come out and start making speeches, and the Democrats say, oh, there's our new issue, and they start making speeches, and that is supposed to be the narrative of the country. That's supposed to be where the attention goes in the country. It's the same technique that is used by magicians. I love sleight of hand magicians, right? Because they can do amazing things while you're looking straight at them, because all they do is just divert your attention for a single second, and in that second, they pull off the trick. Guys who play three-card Monte do the same thing. I don't mind that because I know I'm being tricked, but with the media, it's very, very different because it's a scam. And the fact that the American people, with Trump in the bully pulpit, with him using Twitter, even though he says things that sometimes are just obnoxious, he is able to set an agenda as well, and we are able to choose what we do. You know, ABC News online, not their TV station, ABC News had an article called "A Fake News Story Exposes a Real Crisis." And this is a constant, was it Evan Thomas? I can't remember who it was who said, we got the facts wrong, but the narrative was right. So this is what they're essentially saying. This is Lauren Peel. She says the Trump administration last year lost nearly 1,500 migrant children whom a government agency placed with U.S. sponsors. Shocking news, but it wasn't true. Now, you remember, if you listened to this podcast, we told you it wasn't true. We told you that these people had just been placed they'd been placed with relatives in America, but some of those relatives were here illegally and didn't answer the phone when people called to check on them. That was all that was going on. But, she says, it wasn't true. The news was fake, but it was enough to outrage politicians, stir up journalists, and make the public ask questions. Chasing this misleading story, however, helped uncover a story that many found even more troubling, and this one was real. And this is the children at the border being separated from their parents, which again is only what they're paying attention to, because they're not paying attention to the 400,000 foster children who are separated from their parents forcibly in America. They're not paying attention to our children because they want to pay attention to foreign children because they want the border open. They want our border security not to be in place. And it's really interesting. And then they back this up with this incredible rhetoric, this incredible hysterical rhetoric. And you have to remember, like I said yesterday, it's like the hitman in the mafia. You only need a couple of people to deliver the hysterical rhetoric, and then everybody else can say, well, I don't agree with that, but, and then you think, well, they've moved the Overton window. They've moved the window of acceptable speech. Take a listen to Michael Moore. And I know you all love Michael Moore, and you're probably already lined up outside the theater to get the tickets for his latest film. But here's Michael Moore talking about you. He's talking about us. He's talking about the people who vote for Trump and what Trump is doing. And this is the backup that the press has when they divert your attention to some crying babies, 2,000 crying babies. I don't want the babies crying. I want them treated well. Still, there are a lot of crying babies, and they choose which ones they're going to film, and then they're backed up by rhetoric like this.
This is the beauty and the genius of Trump, and why you have to step back for a second and admire him the way Patton admired Rommel. That Trump when he says he's going to do something, he's going to do it, and he is relentless. Yeah. He's even though he did what he did this week with the children in the cages, but he's still going to have the internment camps. He's never going to give up on this. Never going to give up on the wall. They are never going to stop. And we never act like that on any of the things that we say we believe in. They are relentless. Right. They are to the core, and we are like, somewhere. So that's how we are, and we have got to stop.
Yeah, they are so lovely. They're so lovely. They're like Judy Garland and Wizard of Oz. You know, Shapiro was on Maher's show. I don't know if you saw that. And Maher was talking. Shapiro was great on the Russian stuff. Maher actually couldn't believe that Ben didn't think that Trump was colluding with the Russians, and Ben was pointing out all the great stuff that Trump has done in dealing with the Russians, despite his sometimes soft rhetoric. But I couldn't believe that Maher was sitting there making the argument that the left was more civil. All the incivility was coming from the right. I mean, this is after 50 years of calling us racist, of calling men pigs. And there's Michael Moore calling us MFs, right? He's right there. He's calling us MFs. And then saying how wonderful and lovely they are. They're singing Over the Rainbow. I cannot believe the self-delusion. And you know, if they didn't have this rhetoric, if they didn't think we were racist, if they weren't pumped up with self-righteousness, they would have to do something else. They would have to ask us why we believe the things that we believe. Why do we believe it's good to have secure borders? First of all, that we should be able to control our own borders, that we should be able to control our population, that immigration and illegal immigration are two separate subjects, two different subjects. But if you look at what's happening in Europe now, it's really interesting. You remember, I guess it was 2015, all these migrants come flowing across the borders, and Angela Merkel, who somehow has become the leader of Europe, I guess because the German economy is so strong. It's like Germany tried twice to destroy these people. They finally did it. Angela Merkel says, we'll manage. That's what she says. We'll manage. We'll take them all in. We'll manage. And she basically gets the EU to insist that everybody take their portion of Islamic immigrants, right? People who are coming in, they're escaping from, but they're not necessarily running to. They're not coming to Europe because they're saying to themselves, you know what? I want to be a European. I want to be a modern Christian type of guy. I want to join Christian Judeo society. That's not what they're saying. They're saying, get me out of here because these people are going to kill me, or there's too much poverty here, or whatever it is chasing them over the border. So they're not coming to get involved. So they come flowing over. Now, and what are the results? What are the results of these open borders? In Denmark, right? This is Denmark. It is one of the nicest countries on earth. This is like wonderful, wonderful, you know, while we're singing songs, it's like wonderful, wonderful Copenhagen, beautiful gem of the sea. You know, this is like listen to the laws they have. They have a new set of laws. They're called ghetto laws. Denmark's government is introducing, this is from the New York Times, I think it used to be a newspaper. Denmark's government is introducing a new set of laws to regulate life in 25 low-income and heavily Muslim enclaves, saying that they call ghettos. They call them ghettos. They're saying that if families there do not willingly merge into the country's mainstream, they should be compelled to merge. For decades, integrating immigrants has posed a thorny challenge to the Danish model, intended to serve a small, homogeneous population. Leaders are focusing their ire on urban neighborhoods where immigrants, some of them placed there by the government, live in dense concentrations with high rates of unemployment and gang violence. Starting at the age of 1. Now, you're talking about separating children at the border here because their parents have to be deported and have to be imprisoned, and we're not allowed to hold them in the prison with the children, right, after a certain period of time. But now, in Denmark, starting at the age of 1, ghetto children must be separated from their families for at least 25 hours a week, not including nap time, for mandatory instruction in Danish values, including the traditions of Christmas and Easter and the Danish language. Non-compliance could result in a stoppage of welfare payments. Other Danish citizens are free to choose whether to enroll children in preschool up to the age of 6. In his annual New Year's speech, Prime Minister Lars Løkke Rasmussen warned that ghettos could reach out their tentacles onto the streets by spreading violence, and that because of ghettos, quote, cracks have appeared on the map of Denmark. Politicians who once used the word integration now call frankly for assimilation. That tough approach is embodied in the ghetto package of 22 proposals presented by the government in early March. Most have been agreed upon by a parliamentary majority, and more will be subject to a vote in the fall. I mean, that is a real crackdown. How would you like it if they suddenly said, oh, you know what, in Muslim neighborhoods, we're going to take children away and teach them about Christmas and teach them about Easter? I mean, that would be un-American. But at some point, if you have open borders, if you don't take care of the culture of your country, if you don't take care of the basic attitudes in your country, you're forced to these extremities. Denmark, is Denmark some kind of fascist country? Absolutely not. It's the opposite. And yet listen to what they're doing. And when you have normal people, good people, open-hearted, liberal people lining up, getting in line next to fascists, you did something wrong. You put them in that position. It's not them. They don't want to be there. I'm sure there are plenty of people in Denmark who feel bad about this, but they got to do what they got to do because their open border system was destructive to their culture. In Germany, Angela Merkel, who has been in power way too long and I think has done a terrible job. I'm not there, but I just think she has made a lot of mistakes. I believe this is also from the Times. Angela Merkel, who staked her legacy on welcoming hundreds of thousands of migrants into Germany, agreed on Monday to build border camps for asylum seekers and to tighten the border with Austria in a political deal to save her government. She's fighting for her political life, and so she has to backtrack on all this stuff. And all these things, these taking tough stances on the border now, right, keeps you from having to violate your values later. It's tough love, right? If you teach your kids to behave when they're little, you don't have to do terrible things and oppress them when they're teenagers and should be having more freedom, right? If you do the job that you're supposed to do, which is being a little tough when the kid is little and you want the kid to like you and you don't like to see the kid cry, but sometimes you have to say no and you have to, be a little bit tougher. So later on, the kid can control himself. You got to do the same thing with your country. You got to control the borders, have a little tough love at the borders, enforce your laws so the laws mean something, because when you don't enforce good laws, then all your laws become disrespected, right? So you got to do all that stuff. And the left, because they resort immediately to this rhetoric, it's racism. You're all, MFs. You're all bad guys. You're just relentless. And we are singing somewhere over the rainbow. We're so wonderful. Because they have that rhetoric, they don't ask themselves, maybe just ask, why do we think the things we think? Look to Europe. Look at what's happening. Look at the things that are happening. The amazing thing, and this really is amazing, you got to hand it to Trump on this stuff. He stands up to them and he survives. His approval ratings have actually risen in the 2 weeks since they started this. It's really a month. It's a month since they started this. His approval ratings have gone up. They are much higher. They keep talking about how unpopular he is, but he's much more popular than Obama was at the same time. And to me, it's delightful to watch the media fail. I mean, it's delightful when the media is this corrupt, when it's this ideological, when it's this one-sided, it's delightful to watch them fail. Chuck Todd was whining about this. We got to look at this. Chuck Todd is whining. He's winning. He's not popular, but he's winning. He's winning because you guys stink.
The announced retirement of Supreme Court Justice Anthony Kennedy this week helped make one political reality clear. Despite his overall unpopularity, President Trump is winning, and the Democrats right now are reeling. The Supreme Court. Mr. Trump is about to shape the court for a generation by choosing a possible tie-breaking conservative justice, and he's already filled the lower courts with like-minded conservatives. How about the Republican Party? The president's approval rating among Republicans is around 90%. Elected Republicans fear criticizing him, and the party has become a cult of personality, his. How about fake news? Mr. Trump has turned that phrase, which initially referred to the phony Russian-generated stories designed to support his campaign in 2016, into an applause line now to discredit responsible reporting showcasing his misdeeds. How about credibility? If reporters faithfully fact-check the president's serial misstatements, they risk being considered biased. If they don't, the misstatements gain traction. Either way, Mr. Trump wins. The Mueller investigation. The president has succeeded in convincing millions that the investigation is biased, despite trafficking only in innuendo and not providing evidence.
So much of that was untrue. The fake news thing was not started to talk about Russian stuff. It was started by left-wing activists about the Pizzagate story, which may have been created by left-wing activists so they could start the fake news story. It was started, Cheryl Atkinson has come very close to proving, but she certainly has made it look suspicious that it was started in order to get people, left-wingers like Snopes and Politicheck and the Southern Poverty Law Center, to get them their claws into social media, which they have done. It was a very successful trick used by the left. It wasn't, and Trump just was clever enough to take it over. And what is he talking about when he talks about press credibility? You know, they just fired, or at least they parted ways, I should say. ABC News has parted ways with Brian Ross. And Brian Ross has made more mistakes. He recently, I think it was in December, he claimed that Michael Flynn was going to testify that President Trump, as a candidate, ordered him to make contact with the Russians, which turned out to be untrue. It was President Trump, as president-elect, asked him to make contact with the Russians, which was, of course, what presidents do. You make contact with other countries. And so Brian Ross was doing that. In 2001, Ross claimed that the anthrax used in deadly attacks after 9/11 was coated with bentonite, a chemical compound found only in biological weapons made by Saddam Hussein. In 2006, Ross claimed Pakistani officials had arrested Matur Rehman, an al-Qaeda explosives expert who kept an official list of terrorist recruits. That was untrue. In 2006, Ross relayed that then House Speaker Dennis Hastert was under FBI investigation. I mean, this guy has been getting it wrong forever, and so have a lot of Chuck Todd's colleagues, and they never pay the price. The fact that he's, you know, I mean, who is that guy, Brian Anderson, who's now on MSNBC? That guy was just making stuff up. How has he still got a job? How has he still got a job? It's one thing to make mistakes. It's one thing to, you know, it's another thing to lie. I mean, the guy lies, and there he is still working away because they never pay the price. And Chuck Todd is saying that somehow they are credible and Donald Trump is being unfair to them. And of course, the judges, this thing with the judges, they're going nuts. And the way they're reporting it is so absurd. Everything is Roe v. Wade. Are we going to lose our precious right to kill our children? And remember, Roe v. Wade does not give you the right to an abortion. What it does is it takes away the right of your state to make laws about it. And if they think abortion is such a winner politically, why are they afraid of losing the states? Why are they afraid of giving people the right to vote for the kinds of laws they want? I mean, listen to CNN's legal guy, Jeffrey Toobin. Listen to the hysteria with which he talks about the Trump Supreme Court pick.
I think sometimes we talk about Supreme Court too much in abstractions about dignity and who's qualified and who's not qualified. Let's talk facts. Let's talk about what America is going to be like that's different. You are going to see 20 states pass laws banning abortion outright, just banning abortion, and because they know that there are now going to be 5 votes on the Supreme Court to overturn Roe v. Wade. And abortion will be illegal in a significant part of the United States in 18 months. There is just no doubt about that. And that's why these seats matter so much, because you know, one of my favorite lines about the Supreme Court was by Justice Robert Jackson, who served on the court in the 1940s and 50s. And he said, "We are not final because we are infallible. We are infallible because we are final." Somebody has the last word, and here it's the Supreme Court, and right. Roe v. Wade is doomed. It is gone because Donald Trump won the election.
You're a mean, mad white man.
He is a mean man. So there he is, a legal expert. I am not a legal expert. I'm not a lawyer. I am a barefoot teller of tales. I am just a guy who makes up stories. I am here to tell you, I bet Roe v. Wade survives a court with a new pick from Trump. Let's say that Trump actually does a good job and picks a guy like Gorsuch or the lady I was talking about earlier, who I think would be an excellent pick, makes a great pick. That is going to mean that John Roberts becomes the swing vote instead of Anthony Kennedy. I'm not so sure. I mean, I can't predict the future. Obviously, neither can he. But I'm not so sure John Roberts is going to take down Roe v. Wade. John Roberts is a big guy for precedent. There's such a thing as, what do they call it, stare decisis or something, which basically means the precedent is so much a part of American society that withdrawing the precedent would actually be more harmful even than doing the good. But listen to the way he talked about this. All he wants are the results. He doesn't care about the law. That's CNN's legal expert. He's not caring about the law. He just wants the results. I just want to go back in time a little bit and take a look at Antonin Scalia talking to Piers Morgan. And Piers Morgan cannot get this through his head that the law matters. What matters about the Supreme Court is the law. And Antonin Scalia describes it to him. He's talking about Roe v. Wade.
The founding fathers were never going to have any reason at that time to consider a woman's right to keep a baby or to have an abortion. It wouldn't have even entered their minds, would it?
I don't know why. Why wouldn't it?
Because at the time it was just...
They didn't have wives and daughters that they cared about?
They did, but it was not an issue that they would ever consider framing in a constitution.
I don't
But when
know.
women began to take charge in the last century of their lives and their rights and so on, and began to fight for these, everybody believed that was the right thing to do, didn't they? I mean, why would you be instinctively against that?
My view is, regardless of whether you think prohibiting abortion is good or whether you think prohibiting abortion is bad, regardless of how you come out on that, my only point is the Constitution does not say anything about it. It leaves it up to democratic choice. Some states prohibited it, some states didn't. What Roe versus Wade said was that no state can prohibit it. That is simply not in the Constitution. It was one of those many things, most things in the world, left to democratic choice.
See, this is, we were talking about watching the soccer game and missing the gorilla. The gorilla is the Constitution. What the press wants is they want you to be looking at the issues all the time, which results we get here, which results we get there. But the gorilla is the Constitution. Keep your eye on the Constitution. What Scalia was saying there, that is the high-minded argument, not the argument that, the founders didn't have wives and sisters, so they didn't know anything about abortion. The Constitution is changeable. We can change it by democratic process. It is not for 5 unelected judges to make decrees from the bench. That is not what they're supposed to do. The left don't mind it when it goes their way, but if it started to go the other way, they'd get very, very upset. Keep your eye on the gorilla. The gorilla is the Constitution. Don't let them distract you. And so far, I think we're doing that. I think we are winning. I think we go into July 4th at a high. Just remember, these are not difficult times. These are good times during which the left is angry. This is really different, right? These are not troubled times. These are great times during which the left is angry.